So attending to the, these are my thoughts on what I just read. Attending to the temporal details in order to extract the eternal pattern that is being played out in history seems to be the project that Williston Walker's undertaking. He does a really good job of accurately characterizing, at least to my knowledge, having a philosophy background, history philosophy background, like the various philosophical movements of the time that led up to the time, at least in the West. I'm less familiar with the religious movements. I think it's that especially the final paragraph dovetails really well with what we're learning in our liturgical theology class through our readings on Kabbasalas, which is that in order for Christ to truly be the salvation of man, he must fulfill all the aspects of man's nature, with leaving nothing in remainder. And so, given the fact that people have these longings for all of these various things that are good, that Christianity is able to extract from these various kind of partial religious traditions, in order to fulfill them in Christ, as that which enables man to get everything they need from a single source, who is a person as well as our food, and is most personal in giving his body to us, the dying and rising God, all the different elements that exist in part in those other religious traditions and philosophical traditions, but ultimately their unity in Christ, so that the learned man and the simpleton both can get what they need from the same source. And the simpleton can grow into a learned man and find no incongruity between what he is learning and what he needs for the flourishing of his body and his soul. And so this fits in with Kabbasalas' notion that Christ becomes all to us, and we encounter him in the myriad faces of those around us, and we learn to encounter him in all of reality through participation in worship, such that aspects of who God is work their way into us by means of transference dynamics. And so his righteousness and his righteous way of seeing are imparted to us through our adoration of him, our eating of him, our seeing of him in the face, seeing him in the face of our brothers and our neighbors, and ultimately our enemies. That this process of participation in the cycles of the seasons, the life of worship, is what enables us to incarnate Christ in our own lives, or to prepare the ground for Christ to be born in us. And so, if Christ is and in short, historically, if Christ is to be the answer to all the religious longings and questions, and philosophical and all the longings that human beings have for a good eternity, then he must embody ritually all those goods that people have found in other traditions. And thus there is a kind of syncretism at the heart of early Christianity, but not in a kind of vulgar way that says, oh, these other things are actually better than Christianity, but Christianity just took them. No, Christianity was identifying those good elements in those other things, and then redeeming them by drawing them up into a unity of signs and symbols and mysteries and initiatory rites that gives man what he desires, which is to get everything he needs from a single source. That all attempts to revert to a kind of paganism of a diversity of sources actually does the exact opposite of what the heart longs for, which is unity in the object of worship, and the gathering together of all you need into one. And it's interesting that all of these movements, these paganizing movements, people becoming witches and embracing polyamory, it all involves itself in a fracturing of the attention and of the will, and of the source of life, of vitality for people. That if you're in a polyamorous relationship, for example, you're saying from the outset that this person can't give me everything that I need, which is good, which is true. It's actually a true intuition. But if there's nothing higher than the people around you, then the logical, but relationships are your kind of deity, then the logical next step is to look for somebody else to satisfy other aspects of you that person cannot fulfill because of their limitations, because they are a finite human being. And so it would make sense, like polyamory is almost a logical inevitability with the death of God. And it also is not going to work. It's not going to work because it's just facilitating the further fragmentation of a person's object of attention, of their ability to attend to something higher than themselves. And so people despair, and they end up despairing of finding or they despair of finding resolution of these of the fragmentation of objects of adoration, and thus the fragmenting effect that has on the soul. They despair of finding any stability or solidity, freedom from anxiety that results from having not everything unified in one source in Christ. They turn inward into themselves and begin to try and ground themselves from within themselves, no longer being grounded in this or that relationship, but entirely within the purview of one's own self-understanding and self-creation. One attempts to ground oneself. This is likewise the ultimate manifestation of futility, because how can one save oneself through self-definition? It's impossible. How can one heal oneself? It makes no sense. How can one see oneself as the object of unity? It's self-defeating to begin with at the outset. But even in this late stage of severe decay, in which people are grasping for more and more diverse solutions to the problem of their disintegrating sense of self, and their increasing anxiety, and their inability to stitch together all forms of goodness and meaning into one coherent whole, Christ still stands as the answer to all of those longings. But specifically Orthodox Christianity, because Orthodox Christianity is the one that has maintained throughout the centuries this unity of all things in Christ. Whereas in Protestantism, and even to a certain extent in Catholicism, that unity has already begun to fragment and fracture with the scholastic movement, where you can where things are no longer completely unified in Christ, as embodied in the worship. That worship, that adoration of God as the highest in his manifestation, in his various manifestations throughout the world, that adoration itself is what the heart longs for, as it's manifested in all the ways that Orthodoxy is able to offer, through the mysteries, through the liturgical worship, and the various deep initiatory and the various deep initiatory rites that ultimately people who've experienced only a partial Christianity that's kind of fragmented, that cannot see Christ as embodying the whole, are hopefully they'll begin to turn and see that it is orthodoxy that is held on actually to a true form of syncretism, not the kind of syncretism that results from trying to stitch all these beliefs together and say all of them are valid, and somehow give someone both diversity and unity at the same time, in a kind of ungenerative, a necrotic paradox that actually doesn't lead to life but to death. Instead, by pulling from all of these various elements of the goods of these various cultures, as they manifested themselves in the first century, saying, no, Christ fulfills all these things. And we're going to show you that through the life of worship and the mysteries of the church. It's a profound move to make. And I agree with the author that I believe it's providential. And I think it's providential in our time as well, that as people grasp for more and more desperate and diverse, multifarious solutions to their angst, to their death anxieties, that Christ will become more and more and more attractive again. Anyway, all for now.